Raging wildfires, melting glaciers, deadlier heat waves. These are some of the more extreme pictures that come to mind when you think of climate change.
Many Americans still think of climate change as a distant problem, when in fact, the reality is that climate change is right here, right now. It's already harming everyone in America on some level, in particular harming the people and the places and the things that we love.
This is a News 4 special, Rising Tides, Making a More Resilient Lowcountry. Sponsored by Powell Roofing, trusted roofing contractor covering Charleston's Lowcountry.
In the Lowcountry, we are already experiencing
more flooding,
more beach erosion,
and longer, more intense heat waves.
All influenced by our warming world.
Scientists agree that these impacts will continue to worsen in the coming years.
It's because our planet continues to warm as a direct result of our actions.
Every day we are adding heat-trapping gases into our atmosphere.
Our team has been all over the Lowcountry, seeing how people in all walks of life are impacted by climate change and how they're adapting.
Coming up in the next half hour, I find out how the city of Charleston is planning for the future while keeping an eye on the rising water levels.
I went to Colleton County to learn how one farmer is finding ways to adapt to hotter summers.
And we learned how a warming world can make you sneeze more and what we can do to make the pollen season more bearable.
I caught up with one local shrimper to see how the warmer waters are changing what's being caught in the nets off our coast. This is Rising Tides, Making the Lowcountry More Resilient, News 4's 2025 Climate Change Special.
The beautiful scenery of the Lowcountry is made up of salt marshes, sea islands, and other coastal waterways. But we could see ocean water creeping on shore more frequently. Unfortunately, coastal flooding is not an unusual event here. Many people are affected by it, especially in flood-prone areas like low-lying roads and homes near the coast.
We've seen the frequency of coastal flooding really at all impact levels, minor, moderate, and major. Has really increased in frequency rather significantly, especially over the last 10 years or so. That's where we've seen the number of these events each year on average really increase, sometimes by as much as 3 times compared to the previous decade.
The graphic here shows that the top 10 years with the most coastal flooding events in Charleston have all been since 2014, and this is a trend that Holloway expects to continue moving forward.
Charleston's more frequent rounds of coastal flooding are driven by sea level rise as warm water expands and glaciers melt. According to NOAA tide gauge data, Charleston has seen over a foot of sea level rise in the past century, and nearly half of this observed rise has been in the last 20 years. Sea levels are rising much faster today than compared to the past. This current pace is much faster than the average, which had been roughly 8 to 9 inches since the 1880s. The rapidly rising sea levels are likely to result in more frequent and intense coastal flooding, a more robust storm surge, and worsening coastal erosion.
The good news is even with rising sea levels, there are ways to protect from beach erosion. The Maritime Forest covers 190 acres of Sullivan's Island, flourishing with shrubs and trees, providing pit stops and habitats for our wildlife. But it also buffers the beachfront from wind and waves. Unfortunately, homes at Breach Inlet don't get that benefit. Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms are more vulnerable to beach erosion in this area, and they've recently had to undergo a beach renourishment project to replace sand along the shoreline.
Our neighbors on Isle of Palms, they had it really bad with the last few storms, lost a lot of sand. So the Army Corps actually saw an opportunity in using the beneficial reuse of sediment that they've been pulling out of the ICW for years and pumping that back onto the shoreline from whence it came, basically.
Fanning says while the beach renourishment project wrapped up on the Sullivan's Island side, she says the project will likely continue into the summer. Fishing and shrimping are vital to the economy of the Lowcountry, but things are changing, and a lot of that is driven by the ocean. Dave Williams caught up with local shrimper Rocky Magwood to find out what he's seeing on the water.
Weather and fishing are two of my loves here in the Lowcountry, and rising water temperatures could impact those significantly moving forward into the future.
It usually shows up whenever our water temperature gets over 68 to 70 degrees, and to get them in real prime time is about 75 degrees. And that's where we're at now. We're getting close to it, so they're starting to show up good now.
Magwood is seeing good numbers of shrimp, but just about everything in the ocean eats shrimp, and more predators are showing up from other places.
Not near as many sharks when we were younger. Now that the water stays warm year round, a lot warmer than it used to, we do have a lot more sharks.
There's different vegetation showing up too. Things that would be more likely seen off the coasts of Florida and Georgia, farther south, and even warmer water.
You also see the grass, like the grass is changing on the bottom. Like today we had a bunch of different style grass that's in the nets that I haven't seen in a long time. And it's usually from when we work down in warmer waters that we see that.
Tarpon, mantis shrimp, and even spiny lobsters, typically in the Bahamas and the Florida Keys, are popping up in the Lowcountry waters more frequently.
You heard about somebody might catch one, but now it's like somebody will catch them, a couple of them a year. It was real unrare to see that kind of fish around, a lobster inshore especially. But I hear about them being offshore a lot more than what you've ever had here because the water's getting warmer.
It pushes our typical shrimp and fish species farther north as well.
And then you got things that show up different too, is like you just thinking about shrimp. Now you hear shrimp being caught all the way above Virginia, and white shrimp in the fall, and we've never heard of that before, and now they're all the way north in Virginia.
But climate change is more than just warming ocean temperatures. It also means more water for coastal areas like the city of Charleston.
We're seeing it come in more rain, we're seeing it come in higher tides, we're seeing it come in more storm events, and so we need to address it.
It's something West Ashley resident Bruce Brown agrees with. He has been in his house since Hurricane Hugo. It didn't flood then, but he says it has been flooding more often lately, especially in the past 10 years.
Mother Earth's going to do what she's going to do. But the drainage is different because of, I think mainly because of construction.
More construction, poor drainage, and more water. The bottom line, it's an issue that needs to be addressed sooner than later, so folks like Brown don't get water in their homes. And managing the water is a priority for Mayor William Cogswell.
I want to make sure that we're doing things to address things that we see day in and day out.
Our planning efforts are always kind of principal water first, but really I also think here in the city of Charleston, we're trying to see how many benefits, how many multifaceted kind of projects and plans can we get out with water.
The city began resiliency planning roughly 10 years ago. While it's a work in progress, they try to reevaluate it every 5 years.
So we have a very great online interactive tool where people can pull up their basin, they can see what ongoing stormwater projects, they can see some of the schematic conceptual projects for the water plan.
In addition to the Storm Basin Flood Plan, there are lots of other projects and goals.
We are the only city in the state that has put forth a climate action plan and committed to, net zero emissions by 2050.
To tackle all these projects and make Charleston more resilient against climate change, some crucial partnerships are needed.
The biggest tool is going to be money and our relationships with the federal government, with the state government, and with the county, because that's what it's going to take to combat that. And it's going to take all hands on deck effort.
Welcome back to Rising Tides, Making a More Resilient Lowcountry, sponsored by Powell Roofing.
Welcome back. Climate change is affecting all of us here in the Lowcountry, and being resilient is key for officials with the city of Charleston. But what will other areas do to battle rising waters and warmer temperatures? I spoke with a handful of cities and towns to find out how they're adapting to the ever-changing climate. From Mount Pleasant,
I have noticed that some of our flood-prone areas have been impacted a little bit more than usual.
To Sullivan's Island.
Flooding happens a lot more frequently.
And all the way down to Folly Beach.
The council members, the mayor, citizens drive over this causeway every day, and it is hard to not notice the water coming up.
People are noticing the increased flooding and rise in water levels. But what are our local towns and cities doing to adapt to the changing climate? We start on Sullivan's Island, where the maritime forest has proven to be beneficial.
Just recognizing that those trees can buffer the force of winds during hurricanes and can dry out the ground in between rains, and just are such a tremendous asset given the fact that we do anticipate having ever more frequent and intense storms.
For the town of Mount Pleasant and city of Folly Beach, it's oyster reefs.
When the waters rise, when there are floods, oysters are a natural form of that type of protection. So ideally, all of our river is covered in oysters, not only for the protection that it offers, but the ecosystem benefits, the commercial fishing, right?
We also have partnered with South Carolina DNR to do more oyster reef building. Some of those areas are Alhambra, Waterfront Park.
These municipalities have also adopted comprehensive plans and specific ones for sea level rise adaptation, marsh front management, and hazard mitigation. The full comprehensive plans are reviewed every 5 years by officials. These cities and towns are also making their communities more resilient through projects.
There's a Center Street improvement plan that's working on drainage. Behind the post office here, there are a lot of improvements in terms of upgrading the drainage system. Here where we are at the Folly River Park, you can see a rain barrel that's in place, a rain garden.
With the help of a grant and additional funding, the town of Sullivan's Island, in partnership with Seaman Whiteside, was able to put together a stormwater master plan.
We have major stormwater infrastructure improvements coming up in the next couple of years that are going to make a big impact.
One focus in Mount Pleasant is the Low Impact Development Program.
And it also promotes enhancing more green infrastructure as well. Some of the other stuff set for, we do our tree canopy program, so we have our tree bank program, as well as I said before, where we do our oyster reef building as well.
Mount Pleasant Mayor Will Haney says the town is also focused on conserving green space.
Every bit of land that is not developed slows water down, helps it, get back into the ground, and everybody loves green space. I have not met a resident yet who does not love green space.
We did reach out to Edisto Beach and the Isle of Palms to learn more about their resiliency efforts, but we've not yet heard back. Dorchester County declined to comment. And in Berkeley County, they issued a statement saying, quote, Berkeley County mitigates any risk we're able through the emergency management process, including various stakeholders. Climate-related hazards are possible in Berkeley County as listed in our current mitigation plan and emergency operations plan. Mitigation requires a true whole community effort within Berkeley County.
You may have noticed this spring in Charleston certainly packed a stronger punch. The allergy season here in the Lowcountry, spoiler alert, will be longer and more intense. But why? Fallon Mears explains.
As we continue to increase the amount of carbon in our atmosphere, we're increasing the ability for these plants to create that pollen, which may sound like good news in terms of plants being able to thrive, right? But what it does is it makes that pollen process more intense.
That means more pollen as well as a longer allergy season. An ENT physician at NYU Lone Health studied the effects of climate change on hay fever over the past 2 decades.
One of the papers that we studied also showed that there's about 20% more pollen in the atmosphere as compared to 50 years ago.
But how much longer each year will that yellow blanket invade our everyday lives?
Charleston's seen an increase on average of 32 days, so about 280 days between freezes.
And studies do show that the pollen itself is more allergenic, meaning that it produces more severe allergy symptoms.
A Lowcountry allergist says even those who have never had pollen allergies may be feeling it this year.
Patients have said that it's been one of their worst seasons, and it even has started earlier than previous years and is lasting longer than previous years as well.
If there's new trees or plants that are growing in that environment and are able to produce pollen that you are allergic to, that could be one of the reasons that you're now feeling pollen allergies.
And if we want to see some relief, there are steps we can all take.
One of the easiest things we can do, right, is cut down on that carbon pollution, the things that we know are emitting those heat-trapping pollutants.
Some solutions are solar panels and electric vehicles, but also green space.
But making sure we put those native plants in, even though it may sound counterproductive in terms of allergies, that's one of our best tools that we have in order to combat climate change.
In the meantime, how can we try to limit our sneezing, itchy eyes, and other symptoms?
So trying to avoid the outdoors, during the peak morning hours, keeping an eye on, pollen counts, like washing clothes, showering before bedtime, keeping the windows closed so we're not getting the pollen indoors as well.
Welcome back to Rising Tides, Making a More Resilient Lowcountry, sponsored by Powell Roofing.
Climate change has affected more people than just those living along the coast. Inland farmers are noticing those changes, from more droughts to hotter summers, affecting the way they raise their farms.
It had the occasional drought, but it wasn't like it is today.
Just outside of Walterboro, you'll find Keegan Fillion Farm. It's where Mark Fillion and his wife have been farming since the late 1980s.
We started raising hogs and been raising hogs pretty much ever since. In 2005, we started raising chickens, and we also have had cows for pretty much the whole time.
But with the changing climate, the Fillion family has had to make changes in the way they raise their chickens.
A couple of years ago, we switched and stopped raising them in the summertime because it used to be in the wintertime we had a hard time keeping them alive. Now, in the wintertime, we have no problem, but the summertime, the heat and humidity, we'd lose chickens quite a bit. So we just now stopped raising chickens after June.
He's also building a new hog house to keep them cool during the hot summer months.
They can spend their time outside. They'll get fed outside. They have water inside. We'll have electricity with fans. And in the summertime, we'll have sprinklers outside, just like we do now. And they'll come in. They'll get wet under the sprinkler, then they'll come in and lay down in the house and have fans to keep them cool. Hogs can't sweat. I'm tired of losing some hogs in the summertime due to the heat.
But it's not just the heat and animals he has to worry about.
We planted our winter grazing first week of October. We raise oats and rye as a combination. Normally we'd be able to graze it by Thanksgiving or the first week of December. The other fields we didn't get to graze until early January, and then the cold weather came in January. It totally stunted the growth. In some areas it killed the grass or the grazing.
And by the end of the grazing season, he was only able to graze 3 fields rather than his normal 5. Fillion has noticed these extreme changes from his 35 years of farming.
So what caused it or how we're going to mitigate it, that's not my job. That's somebody else's job. All I've got to do is figure out how we're going to survive it on this farm and what we can do to keep our farm profitable for the future.
Sometimes the topic of climate change can be overwhelming. What can we do to help the planet? You can start small, and there are things you can do as a family to lessen your carbon footprint. We talked to an author about her recent book aimed at helping parents navigate this climate crisis.
Maybe it's we're going to eat plant-based meals a little more than we currently do. So if you're somebody who has meat for dinner every night of the week, maybe it's we're only going to do that during weekdays or something like that.
Chervelle also suggests buying used clothes when possible and just trying to limit your overall textile waste.
Whether you're a child or an adult, we can all do our part to help reduce the impacts of climate change. And we need to act now, because we're already seeing the impacts in the form of stronger and more powerful hurricanes. Numerous climate science studies have found a significant link between our warming planet and stronger hurricanes for more than a decade now. Nearly 90% of the Earth's excess heat is being absorbed by our oceans. As oceans' temperatures reach record-breaking levels, they act like lighter fluid to supercharge these storms.
This is something we're actively studying. To what extent are these warm sea surface temperatures influencing these hurricanes and increasing their speed limit and then affecting the storm intensity itself?
The Carolinas saw this firsthand last year, with climate scientists finding that climate change was a key driver of Hurricane Helene's catastrophic impacts. This study from World Weather Attribution found that Helene's rainfall was roughly 10% heavier due to climate change. According to the climate scientists, the water that fueled this devastating storm was 200 to 500 times more likely due to the burning of fossil fuels.
As the communities we love continue to rebuild and recover nearly 9 months after the storm, we prepare for another season.
Coming up in late August, we will bring you another 30-minute special explaining how storms are changing and highlighting how communities can be more resilient as stronger storms become a new normal.
In the meantime, let's continue to explore how we can adapt to the changes we're seeing today and mitigate the worst impacts yet to come. Climate change isn't just polar bears and melting glaciers. This global issue is at our door.
Our goal is to protect the place that we call home, one step at a time. From the most accurate weather team, thanks for watching.